All right, today we're tackling a really critical issue, the water crisis in Gaza. We're going to break down the key findings from a recent Human Rights Watch report, and we'll also pull in some tactical context from the Royal United Services Institute to get a fuller picture of the situation on the ground. Let's dive in.
Before we get into any of the data or the legal arguments, it's so important to ground this in the human stakes. This quote from a father in Rafah really says it all. It sets the stage for everything we're about to explore. Okay, so here's the core claim of the report, and it's a big one. This is the central allegation that forms the foundation for this entire analysis. So let's break down how the report builds that case. So just how severe is the situation that the report describes? Well, this first section really gets into the numbers. The contrast here is just, wow. To put this in perspective, the World Health Organization says we need about 50 to 100 liters of water a day for just our basic needs. But according to the report, nearly 2/3 of households in Gaza were getting by on less than 6 liters. And that's not for everything, that's just for drinking and cooking. And to understand just how much the supply has collapsed, look at this number. The report says that between October 2023 and mid-February 2024, water production in Gaza was just 5.7% of what it used to be. I mean, let that sink in for a second. That's a staggering drop. Okay, so a massive drop in water. But how did it actually get to this point? This next section details the specific actions and obstructions that the report alleges led to this crisis. The report doesn't just point to one thing. It lays out this whole series of alleged actions, from cutting pipelines and electricity to blocking fuel and essential repair materials like chlorine, all the way to damaging the infrastructure itself and, as the report alleges, even killing utility workers who were trying to make repairs. Now, to get some context for all this, a tactical analysis from the Royal United Services Institute is pretty helpful. It talks about the incredible challenges of operating in this kind of environment. They even use a term for it, rubblization, to describe these huge fields of debris. This kind of devastated terrain warfare makes it extremely difficult to not only conduct military operations, but also to access and repair vital civilian infrastructure, like water pipes. And this table really breaks down what that looks like on the ground, according to the report. You've got pipelines damaged, desalination plants shutting down because they don't have fuel, a key warehouse with spare parts getting destroyed, and essential repair materials just systematically blocked from even getting into Gaza. So we've seen the actions and the damage to infrastructure, but what does all this actually mean for people's health? Well, these actions have absolutely cascading consequences, and the next section of the report tries to quantify that human cost. The health statistics in the report are just shocking. According to UNICEF data, in December 2023 alone, there was a 2,000% increase in the daily rate of diarrhea cases among children under 5. 2,000%. And behind a number that big are these just heartbreaking individual accounts. The report includes testimony from healthcare workers like Ozma Taha, who describes this direct line from malnourishment and the lack of clean water straight to infant deaths. This lack of clean water and sanitation has created a perfect storm for disease. The report documents these soaring rates. We're talking over 1 million acute respiratory infections, hundreds of thousands of cases of diarrhea and skin diseases, and a major spike in jaundice, which is a sign of hepatitis A.
And the crisis doesn't just stop at disease. It cripples the entire healthcare system. Think about this quote from a surgeon, Dr. Feroz Sidwa. "Every surgical incision I made got infected." It just shows how the water crisis goes so far beyond just thirst. It impacts the most basic ability to provide medical care.
All right. This all leads us to what is, without a doubt, the most serious and complex part of the report. This is where it takes all of its findings and applies a framework of international law to them. So to really follow the report's argument here, we have to get on the same page with the legal terms it's using. This is the definition of extermination as a crime against humanity. The key part here is that it's about the intentional infliction of conditions of life, things like depriving people of food and water, with the aim of destroying part of a population. So here's how the report builds its legal case, step by step. It alleges the water deprivation was intentional and part of a systematic policy. It argues these conditions were calculated to cause destruction, which would meet that legal definition of extermination. And then it takes it one step further, arguing this also constitutes an act of genocide when combined with what it claims is evidence of specific intent. And to support that argument about intent, the report connects the actions on the ground to public statements made by some Israeli officials. It claims these statements amount to direct and public incitement to commit genocide under international law.
So, after laying out this entire case, where does the report go from here? Well, it wraps up with a set of recommendations for a path forward. Let's take a look at what it proposes.
The report gives a pretty clear list of actions it recommends for Israeli authorities, all focused on immediately fixing the crisis. These are things like restoring water and electricity, lifting the blockade, allowing repairs, and complying with orders from the International Court of Justice. But the recommendations don't stop there. The report also looks to the international community, calling on all countries to apply pressure to ensure compliance with international law, suggesting things like stopping military assistance and arms sales. And all of this leaves us with this huge, challenging question. It's one that sits right at that blurry line between the tactical realities of war and the fundamental requirements of humanitarian law. This is really the core tension at the heart of the report, and it's a critical one for all of us to think about. Thank you for joining this explainer.